Come closer. We all know Saturday nights I do power rankings. We all know that the power rankings will garner a lot of attention and a lot of conversation. And this week I watched in horror as the power rankings took a large turn. So let's take a look. Let's start with the non-turning part. Arizona's still 31. No, I didn't make anything with Seattle for 32. And no. 30 is still Buffalo. So no change there. Buffalo's 30. The change comes at 29th with a team that's fallen 5 spots from last week. The toothless Vancouver Canucks. The Canucks have no offense. Their defense is average, and their goaltending is average, and that's just not going to cut it in this day and age. At 28, somehow staying steady, not moving up, it's Ottawa. The Senators are still looking like a team that's going to miss the playoffs. Tonight's loss to Florida was another, just another in a long line of games where you can argue that a goalie robbed them, but you can only argue that for so long, and you got to bury your chances. And it's just where Ottawa's at right now. At 27, they were at 27 last week too, and they have moved around, I swear, is Detroit. The Detroit Red Wings have shown some signs of life here and there, but they just can't. They can't get out of the doldrums, and it's becoming another one of those years for Detroit. It really is. Now in 25th, and moving up 4 spots, which is impressive considering where they've been, is Florida. Florida's on the verge of moving out of the bottom of the league. And don't look now, but Florida looks like they want to get into the conversation in the Atlantic. Remember, the Atlantic division is not as strong as the others, or so they say. We'll watch as this countdown continues, but reportedly, the Atlantic's a really weak division, and it's pretty easy to make the playoffs in the Atlantic. Now, 20... That's 26th. Okay, which one did I miss then? That's 27th. 27th, 26th. Oh no, right? No, I was right. No. I'm already second guessing myself. See what happens? I start going, wait, I screwed up. Okay. 25th. And they moved down 3 spots. Is Philly. Philly looked like they were on the verge of getting out of the bottom 2 rows, and I did have them at 19th at one point not that long ago, but not on a countdown video. Power rankings will not reflect that they were 19th at any point in the recent last 3 weeks, but they were there. I swear they were there. Right there, 26th. I'm talking to myself now. All right, at 24th, and actually moving up by a couple of spots, Montreal. Montreal had moved their way up pretty nicely, and then tonight's result knocked them back a little bit. But Montreal is showing signs of life as well. Montreal and Florida are the 2 teams in the Atlantic that look like they're ready to break out of this Atlantic slump that's been going on with the bottom row. And yeah, they didn't look great in Edmonton tonight, but Talbot played really well, and Montreal's going to be happy with what they got. They'll be happy with the wins over Calgary and Vancouver, and coming out of the Christmas break, they're not in as dire straits as they were, say, a month and a half ago. So that's 24. That's Montreal. At 23, and actually dropping a couple of spots, but not dropping as far down as they were going to. The Anaheim Ducks were dead. Coming into tonight's action, I think I had them at 25th, and they were on the verge of being down here. If Anaheim had lost that game tonight to Pittsburgh and Florida had just stayed where they were with that 1-0 win over Ottawa, I would have been tempted to put Florida at 25th. Absolutely. But Anaheim came out with a win, the best performance they've had in a while. Somebody said something somewhere to get that team going, and so they don't have the dive that other teams have had. But the team in front of them dives by 6 spots from last week. Oh, what an insane dive for the Pittsburgh Penguins. What is going on with the Penguins? How can they be this far down? And I know, Ducks fans are like, wait, we beat them tonight. Yeah, the win gets you right next to them. And if Pittsburgh loses their next one and Anaheim wins their next one, then yeah, absolutely, we're looking at a situation where the Ducks would pass the Penguins on the power rankings, which would have sounded great as recently as a month ago. Now, moving up by 4 spots from last week and threatening to get out of this row and make some noise is Colorado. Losing Tyson Barrie hurts, and apparently he has a broken bone in his hand. I'm not going to drop Colorado down because Tyson Barrie got hurt. I don't do my power rankings that way. But it'll be interesting to see what they do from here and how things work for them from here. And I wouldn't anticipate that next Saturday, because we don't have games Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, next week's power rankings will probably be largely the same as this with some minor changes. But Colorado's one that could make a major breakthrough. They've won games they have to win. That's important. At 20, and moving up by 3 spots, Carolina. And coming out of that 8-1 loss to Toronto, you wouldn't have figured they would move up at all this week. And yet here they are. Maybe that 8-1 loss woke them up. Maybe that reminded them, hey, we'd better have some pride in our game here. We better get our crap together. But whatever it is, they've become better-ish. They're still not there, but they're at least in the conversation. At number 19, dropping 4 spots from last week, Minnesota. I don't know what's going on with Minnesota. I don't know how. I figured they had finally come out of it and that they were getting ahead of the game, and then they slid back this week. You can blame it on Stalock being the goalie, but that would just be foolish. It's not Stalock's fault. This is simply Minnesota's not playing the same. Maybe they don't play as well for Stalock as they did for Dubnyk. Maybe if we looked into the stats and we looked at goal support, maybe he doesn't get the goal support that Dubnyk does. But either way, Minnesota did fall back. They did fall back to 19th. Steady. This team's steady. And we'll see whether they move up or they move down. They had a bad game. They followed it with another bad game, but they had a really good game before that. So in the end, they end up in the same spot they were last week. They had moved up. Now they've moved back down into that same spot. So number 18 for 2 weeks in a row is Chicago. And, you know, I'm trying to figure out which Chicago team's a real team and if they're actually an 18th place team in the NHL. Because if they are, they're not making the playoffs either. But notice they passed Minnesota. So there's that, I guess. At 17, also staying put. And these guys moved up during the week and they moved down during the week. And they've moved up and there they are. It's Calgary. The Flames are 17th. If they'd beaten Montreal, they're probably up here. But because that loss to Montreal, they're still where they were last week. Which is, and I've said this before, part of the issue with the NHL is that teams are very, very closely packed together. So when a team breaks in the wrong direction, it can be a remarkable drop. Pittsburgh, Vancouver being obvious examples. The teams that are winning and then losing and winning and then losing will stay in here. And the teams on big winning streaks should end up in here. They absolutely should. Number 16, up 3 spots. Right about as I figured last week. I had said if they had a good week, they'd move up, and they did. There's San Jose. San Jose, did they switch spots with Minnesota? Almost. Minnesota was 15th last week. San Jose is getting better. And with a couple of big wins this week, they look like they're ready to nail down that third spot and maybe start threatening for the second. I can see them moving up again next week. They're playing good hockey. They're absolutely playing good hockey. At 15, moving up 5 spots from last week, and starting to look like a playoff team somehow, some way, it's the Edmonton Oilers. The concept that the Central will get 5 spots in the playoffs and the Pacific will get 3 looks pretty solid, but Edmonton could get into that conversation. Edmonton could make it 4-4. I don't know where to go with this other than Connor McDavid got hurt in the game tonight, but they say it's not a bone break. If he's watched Brock Besser at all, if it's not a break, he keep playing. But Edmonton has played really, really well. They've won a bunch of games, and they're looking solid. And before that winning streak, they were in this area, and now they're up there, and they're threatening to get into the top 13. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Number 14, I'm going to assume that I wrote that down wrong. They're staying the same spot. So they didn't move up, they didn't move down, and it's Dallas. During the week, they were at one point 12th. They were as low as, I think, 15th, and they're 14th now. It's a mixed bag with Dallas. Again, this mushy middle part, right? The win over Chicago is the difference. If Chicago wins that game, Chicago's likely 15th or 16th, and Dallas is likely down in about 17th. But Dallas wins that game 4-0, and they push Chicago down. So just when Chicago looked like they got over the hump, they had that nice winning streak, they fall down again. That's a dangerous pattern to get into. At 13, down 2 spots from last week, the Rangers. And I know there are Ranger fans who won't like that. I know. I had expected them to go up, but the loss to Toronto tonight knocked them down. And there were other results this week that didn't really go in their favor. Sometimes it's a matter of teams behind you are playing better, so you drop down because they move up. And that's kind of what's happened here. At number 12, and staying steady. They'd actually dropped to 15, but they're back up to 12. So again, because it's a week and it's not a daily power ranking, which nobody wants, in the end, the Islanders stay in the same spot. They're at 12th. They look good enough to make the playoffs. Do they look good enough to win in the playoffs? Everybody asks me about what I think the Islanders are going to do with the Islanders goaltending issue, and I'm not sure. I don't have any kind of answers with with the Islanders goaltending. I wish I did. If I could figure out Islanders goaltending, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys. I'd have a job working for an NHL team. Number 11, and they've fallen. They've fallen. They actually moved up a little bit tonight, but they've fallen on hard times, and it's Columbus. So there you see 3 teams in a row from the Metro Division, 11, 12, and 13, showing just how tightly packed together that division is and how easy it would be for Columbus to fall out of the playoffs. If Pittsburgh can get their act together, if Philly can get another winning streak going, Columbus is in deep trouble. But for right now, I do have them at 11th. Top 2 rows, yes, but remember, Edmonton's trying to break in, Dallas trying to break in, and San Jose's been looking good. There's 3 teams in the West that are all potentially capable of passing Columbus in the next 10 days. So Columbus has to keep some kind of a streak going here. At 10th, and they're down 2 spots this week. I had anticipated them going up. At one point this week, they were 6th, but they're down to 10th, and that's Winnipeg. Winnipeg is frustrating because they look really good one night, and then they look really average the next. And when you're average, that means you're losing. And for Winnipeg, that loss to the Islanders today really hurt. That's one of those games that they really needed to win, and they didn't. And again, their road record is becoming an issue. At number 9, and staying steady, they had a good week and a bad week all rolled into one, is the Leafs. Now that Austin Matthews is back, and he appears to be healthy, and he was engaged in some very key plays tonight, I expect that to be the lowest the Leafs get. I would expect them, as early as next week, to be back in the top row. For right now, Toronto's 9th. The 8-1 win over Carolina was great and all, But then they had a couple middling results after that, and then tonight they beat the Rangers. Big win, pulls them back up to 9th. Coming into tonight, I think I had them 11th. So they come back up, and they end up in the same spot. 8th, down 2 spots, and they fall out of the top row because of tonight's result against San Jose, and that's the Kings. I'm just letting, I know people are raging right now over this result. And it's funny because earlier this week I did a video I posted to Patreon where I was terrified of what was going to happen with my power rankings this week. I was scared this was going to happen. The Kings have fallen out of the top row. They just have. And there's no emotion behind it. So 7th place and moving up 6 spots. Based on their play, they've played very, very solid hockey, and anybody who's watched Boston knows Boston's playing good hockey. Tuukka Rask is playing the best hockey he has in years. They've lost 2 in regulation out of their last 11, and they've just been playing really, really well, and it doesn't matter who they're playing. They play the same game. It's kind of a boring game, but they play their game well. Their young players don't look like young players. They're playing like veterans. DeBrusk, Bjork, yada, yada, yada. Boston is legitimately a number 7 team right now in the NHL. And if they keep up like this, I can't justify dropping them down. I've got Dallas in 14th, and I've got Vancouver in 29th. Vancouver's nosedive is legit, and absolutely, if Buffalo wins a couple games and Vancouver loses a couple, Vancouver could find themselves in 30th. Boston is in 7th. Earlier this week, as I said, I had them up to 8th, and I had nervous reaction to the fact that they could move up to 7th, and I was scared of it. But they're there, and I'm not going to apologize at this point, because they could easily fall next week. 6th place, falling 3 spots. They actually could have ended up further down, but they won tonight. So even though they had 3 losses, and now they've won 1, St. Louis is still 6th. I could easily see them, if they have another week like they had this week, I could easily see them down to 9th or 10th. They dropped 3 spots. It is harder to drop out of the top 5 spots than it is to drop out of these spots. It's just the way that it usually runs. These are usually really good teams that have had nice long winning streaks, and I don't look at 1 or 2 games and say, okay, well, they're done, and start dropping them down to 10th or 11th. As I've said in previous videos, if I'm going to have a team here lose 2 games and end up down here, then there's no point in me even having the board. There's no point in me doing power rankings at all. So St. Louis for me right now is 6th. The win over Vancouver can help get them back on track. I said coming into today, I'm like, all right, well, they've got a game against Vancouver. That'll help, and it did. In 5th place, and down 1 spot from last week. And honestly, they had been 2nd this week. Going into that game against Arizona, they were up to number 2. The loss to Arizona in overtime, combined with the loss tonight to Vegas by a shutout, Washington's dropped to 5th. And which is the real Capitals team? Is it the one that went on that really nice winning streak, or is it this one that's having trouble scoring? That's the question. And again, it's not the Vegas flu. Don't call it that, because that's not what it is. At number 4... At number 4, moving up 1 spot from last week, and absolutely worthy of their spot, is New Jersey. So the New Jersey Devils have managed to move up to 4th in the power rankings. And let's just take a moment here and realize we are in late December. We're 2 days from Christmas, and the New Jersey Devils are number 4 in the power rankings. And they're one of the top teams in the NHL, playing some great hockey. It's scary to me too. Number 3, and down a spot from last week, is Nashville. Nashville has lost a couple of games this week, which hurt their ranking. Of course, the shootout win tonight I treat as a tie, but they dropped. They dropped because somebody else behind them hasn't lost a game in a while. And they beat a couple of teams that they had to beat to kind of prove themselves to well, to me especially. And the fact is that a lot of the teams in this top 10 lost games this week. There's a lot of losses that took place, and by about Wednesday, I was like, oh, they're in the top row. And then it just kept going. And I was like, okay, now they're up to here. And coming into tonight, I had them at fourth. And now tonight, I have to move them up to second. And that's Vegas. Vegas went up 8 spots this week. They went up 8 spots, as I said, because teams ahead of them were losing. So if Toronto, let me get this out of the way when I do this. So Toronto's 9th, right? Let's say there's a game tomorrow night and the Kings lose it. The Kings will drop behind Toronto. And then the next night, Boston plays. Boston loses. Toronto would bounce up ahead of Boston. Depending on the strength of that result, they'll keep moving up. And for Vegas, they kept moving up. You know, whether it's an easy schedule or whatever it is for them, or it's home heavy, doesn't matter. They won the games they had to this week. And they're unbeaten in a while. Vegas is number 2. Which means that, yes, number 1 again this week, and for most of the weeks that I do this power rankings, is Tampa. Tampa with a shutout tonight, Vasilevsky. What part of Tampa's game do you tear apart? What part of Tampa Bay Lightning's game do you look at and say, well, they'd be better if? Not their goaltending. It's not their forwards or their depth at forward. And it's not their defense either. They got that Victor Hedman guy, he's pretty good. Sergachev, he's pretty good. They're really pretty good from top to bottom. And when you're pretty good top to bottom, you've got an excellent team. The Tampa Bay Lightning are number 1. Vegas is number 2. Remember, Vegas beat Tampa this week. And then Vegas beat Washington. So again, you look at strength of schedule, and Vegas moves up because they beat the number 1 team. They beat the team that had been at number 2. And here we are. We're here. With Tampa at number 1 and Vegas number 2. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Hey, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And there's week 11 of the Hockey Guys Power Rankings. I look forward to the usual comment section with this. But again, this is just one man's opinion. This is for fun. And thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.